Welcome to episode 233 of the Digital Tourism Show, sponsored by Resdi. As you can see, filming in different surroundings for those who are watching the video, as working from home due to the coronavirus crisis. But I only felt it was right and proper to get this video online, because in this video I will be speaking with Kyle Long from UnTour Food Tours, whose business predominantly provides tours within China. So we will be discussing how the coronavirus has affected his business, but also the launch of No Appetite for Ignorance, which is an initiative to help engage the public and raise awareness of the xenophobia and the racist attitudes against Chinese and Asian-owned businesses, as well as calling this the Chinese virus. An episode you do not want to miss. So thank you so much, Kyle, for joining me. From what we're about to discuss, from the information you sent across to me, it was what you guys are doing is quite incredible in my opinion. So I thought that would be a good one to share with our community here in terms of what you're doing to help not only combat the coronavirus of crisis that we're in the middle of just now, but also some of the adverse effects you've been seeing with your customers who are the Chinese sort of market in terms of where you do your tours. So thank you so much again for joining us on the Digital Tourism Show.
No problem.
So I'm going to get straight into my first question, which as an operator who does conduct tours in China, and for us in the Western world or for other destinations looking sort of inwards from the outside, how bad is the coronavirus outbreak in China? How bad is it affecting you guys in terms of your business, the bookings that you're making, and the life, not just that, but the livelihoods of your staff and your guys? You know, how much of it is it affecting you guys? You know, media can hype these things up, so it'll be good to sort of hear it from someone who is there. So
yeah, sure. Well, so we operate tours in China, but for foreigners mostly. So our target market are travelers coming in China from Western countries, and also expats that live in Shanghai and Beijing mostly. And so I think we kind of have seen the first wave of the situation with the coronavirus, where because it was in Wuhan first and nobody was sure where it was spreading exactly, you know, once it became international news about the Wuhan outbreak, we saw our bookings basically completely stop. And of course, then all of the cancellations also trickling in. So it's kind of obviously it's a double whammy in the sense that, you know, January and February are generally our slowest months because you've got Chinese New Year happening in there where everything does shut down. But March, April, May, springtime were our busiest months. And so to have that added pressure of all the cancellations, then not seeing anything coming in, we knew that it was going to be really, really an intense crisis for us. And there's lots of different issues that went along with that. So of course we don't have any bookings and no customers, but we were also, during the Chinese holiday, our vendors will travel and shut down. So some of them couldn't get back into the city to reopen even if they wanted to. Our guides were often in other places, so they weren't traveling back into China. And so there's just a whole host of issues. You know, now it's in the news about what a kind of an amazing job China did with their aggressive measures to shut down the virus and contain things. But those super draconian measures meant lots of different issues for all sorts of businesses. I mean, there was basically a complete shutdown of the city. You know, most restaurants weren't open. People couldn't get out of their house except for one designated member of the family to go get groceries. And so there's just in no circumstance where there are going to be tours operating during this time. And we knew that. Mm-hmm. What we weren't really sure of how it was going to happen is this sort of second wave of infections that we're now seeing in other countries and how that would continue to affect us long term as well. Because now we're seeing China pretty much get the situation more or less under control. But at the same time, all the other countries that it's affecting now, that's affecting everybody's perception of travel generally. So I think, you know, it started to move out from China to Italy and different countries where those countries started to see their tourism numbers drop. But now it's just sort of a worldwide collapse, I think, as far as you can call it for travelers. So, you know, as a business, we tried to do as much as we could to pare back our expenses. We've had to let some full-time staff go. We've come to agreements with them for some separation agreements. And a lot of our staff was freelance. So we have the ability to have them sort of on call. But for us, it's just now a waiting game, I think, a lot in terms of waiting for the tourist numbers to come back up and see what happens in the rest of the world. I think even if China doesn't have any new cases in the next, month or two, if the situation abroad is still out of control, it really is going to affect us negatively, and just tourism generally.
Yeah. So on that, actually, where do you see most of your customers coming from in terms of when it's international customers?
Yeah, we see about a third from the U.S. So I think for us with food tourism, since we operate, primarily food tours, the U.S. market is a little bit just knows about food tours generally, and so we get a lot of those travelers. So we get about a third U.S., a third Europe, and sort of a mix of expats for the rest, and corporate clients, and some Australians and New Zealanders as well.
Yeah.
But primarily English-speaking Western countries.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll be severely hit with the flight restrictions and everything else just now, and so yeah. So yeah.
Exactly.
So I can understand.
And now, and even still now, China is trying to protect, obviously, the progress they've made. So anybody, for example, traveling into Beijing from, hard-hit countries like Italy, US, France now, they're requiring 14-day quarantines for anybody coming in. So what traveler is really going to come at this point?
Yeah.
So it's just it's a crazy situation. Nothing you can plan for really, except for, having, some savings to get through it and everything. But this is sort of something you can't know it's coming. The closest parallel we can draw from was the SARS epidemic, I think. And I've seen tourism numbers for incoming travel to China, and it picked back up within about 3 months, and even got higher than it was previously. I think there's going to be some pent up demand, and once it does come back, but I would like to look to that 3-month number and then have some hope. But now with the situation spread to all the other countries, who knows?
Well, fingers crossed for you, that's for sure. So obviously, any business who's going through this crisis, and let's be fair, it's not just tourism; it's going to affect many other businesses worldwide. But obviously, everyone's starting to think about what they're doing marketing-wise. Should they continue marketing, that type of thing? So when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that you have stopped all paid advertising to concentrate more on your sort of organic side of things and organic marketing. Do you feel now is the right time that operators can take stock of what they're doing and think of the sort of more long-term strategies, so when things do subside, hopefully quicker, sooner rather than later, they'll be in a much stronger position at the end of it?
Yeah, I think it's a personal business decision for each company, and that everybody will come to slightly different conclusions. But for us, to see our business go from 100% to, essentially zero, we had to make that decision to cut back on our expenses. And I feel like with a lot of digital marketing, those are, ads being served to remind customers and to, re-engage them and get them to make that purchase, like a lot of that remarketing. And it just doesn't seem useful at this point. So it was sort of a no-brainer for us that we had to cut that off and try to figure out some creative solutions to, I think what's important right now for us especially is to just, and for any operator, would be to sort of engage your community, engage your, your social media followers, everybody that's normally following you. They want you to succeed, I think. I think everybody is kind of rooting for you. And so it's just coming up with different ways to, keep that communication active and find creative ways to stay engaging and create content. I have seen a lot of, tour operators talking about, now we're getting, we're making sure our website is in order. And I think all of that stuff is now, you have time and the pressure is off. And I think that's all smart. I don't think people should go on, vacation and do nothing. So I think, we talked a lot about also just, making sure we have content, set up and ready to go for when things come back as well, because anything you can do to prepare. I mean, you have the time, and in our case, we do have some staff still helping us with not much to do on the ground, so we can try to give them some content creation sort of activities that could help us potentially in the future. So yeah, I think it's really important to look at what you can do that's going to help you down the road, and just try to set your future self up for success. Because once business comes back, maybe it's going to be super quick, and things are going to start rolling, and maybe there'll be other issues that come up that take your time. So I think anything you can do now to be prepared is smart.
Yeah, definitely. Even if it's creating a backlog of content that you can use when things sort of calm down a little bit, stuff like that will sort of give you a head start when that time comes. So one of the things that I really wanted, to speak about, which when you approached us, which sounded really interesting to me, is you've created a new initiative called No Appetite for Ignorance, which is to combat, and I'm going to quote you here in your words, the xenophobia and racist attitudes towards Chinese and Asian owned businesses. So coming from the UK, and I'm sure many listening or watching this episode may not be aware of anything against Chinese citizens going on. So can you explain to everyone what is happening and why you felt you had to set up this initiative?
Yeah, no problem. So basically the project, we came to the conclusion, and having seen some of the news articles and just hearing stories from our network of friends and family abroad, and just the Chinese diaspora abroad, was that, when the news came out that, this is coming from, the outbreak was centered in Wuhan, so this is this Chinese coronavirus, and so in the beginning, especially, I think there was a lot of misinformation about how it was spread. Nobody was really sure. There's all these rumors and misinformation going around, and so that immediate reaction abroad, and we're talking outside of China now, was to, I need to avoid eating Chinese. I need to avoid my local takeout place. I need to, Chinatown isn't safe. And, this is Chinatown, Manhattan. Restaurants were reporting 50 to 70%, cut in their business and foot traffic. And this is before there's any cases, even in New York. We're talking weeks ago. And so it's just all this, that's kind of the heart of the issue, where there's fear, and then there's this xenophobic reaction where, I need to, hunker down, and these are different people from me, and they must, have the virus or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so it's really, I think it's quite disturbing and really sad. And so, and it's hard for us, as business owners in China to really, what can we do? So we really saw that as something that we would like to help combat. So we set up the project, basically the website. We've solicited recommendations from, kind of luminaries in the Chinese food world. You've got Fuchsia Dunlap on there, Qinghe Huang, some chefs in New York City, and some food producers in LA. So we're trying to get a range of people involved and get their recommendations for some of their favorite Chinese restaurants where they are locally. And so just as a way to bring awareness to the situation and educate people about this is an issue. And also, maybe we can do something positive. Maybe we can support these businesses that are really in need and are seeing some steep drop-offs to their traffic. And really, it's happening everywhere. We've seen reports, recently in London of an Asian student that was beaten, and some racist, slurs being thrown at them about, we don't want your virus. And it's clear that at this point that this virus knows no borders, has it's going to affect everyone regardless of race, ethnicity, sex, everything. So I think, especially in the beginning when this was seen as a problem coming from China, this was a huge issue. I'm curious to see how it evolves now that, this is affecting every country. Yeah. But I have a feeling, we have our political leaders, in the US and probably abroad as well, saying things like this Chinese virus still coming from the very top. And that's just a clearly racist attitude at this point, to say that this virus has a nationality. Yeah. Clearly, the World Health Organization has tried to name it, give it a non-location-based name. So we have the disease called COVID-19, and the actual virus named something else. So it's it's an issue that I think needs to be pushed back on, and it's getting picked up in the mainstream as well. I think you're seeing, like I saw, Samantha Bee, she's a late night comedian in the U.S., had a whole piece about, the coronavirus is not an excuse to be racist. Like, this is just something that is now in the conscious, and I think needs to stay in the conscious of people, that this is not an acceptable way to communicate.
No, for sure, and I completely agree. And I honestly think that no matter whether it was in China or some other country or whatever, I think it just gives people who are genuinely racist just an excuse to be more racist. So, so I think it's just, like I said, I've seen that happening in the UK with other political things happening as well. Brexit, you name it, the closet racists come out at that point. So, unfortunately, it's something we all need to combat against. So, yeah. So
exactly, and we included, I mean, obviously we kind of started as the Chinese diaspora around the world that we wanted to help out, but you read more and more stories of just any Asian as actually often the target of attacks and slurs and really like physical attacks sometimes. And so people aren't so discriminating in what they are discriminating, and they're not realizing who is Chinese and whatever. So we wanted to include in the site that there's other Asian businesses as well that really need our support. So if you go to the website, the noappetiteforignorance.org, you'll see a pledge you can take to sort of, that we want people to realize that they can also fight back against the misinformation that they maybe hear their neighbors or their family repeating, so that they feel comfortable responding to that discriminatory or xenophobic language. But also on the website, you'll find the map where we've all around the world now, we've gotten the recommendations for businesses to support. And obviously, I think those are excellent, recommended businesses and restaurants that you're going to have a good meal at. But there's going to, even if your local community isn't on that map, you can find a Chinese business in your area to support. And that was really the gist of it, was that we wanted to highlight that these are our business in China obviously suffered like crazy, and anything we can do to help others sort of come through this and get to the other side is all we could really do. And I think, if there's lessons to be drawn for other tourism business owners, hopefully that's just coming up with some sort of creative way that maybe you can engage your staff as well, that you're doing something positive out of the situation and trying to help, because that's at the end of the day, that's all we can do. There's a lot of talk about reaching out to your local markets as well and trying to come up with tours that are going to appeal to your local markets. And if you can do that, I think that's great. And that's an awesome way to try to find new revenue sources. And we're, working on that as well. But this was just something that I think, potentially helps educate the public. And if there's a side benefit for us as a company, that's great. But ultimately, the main goal was to combat some of this disinformation that we saw.
Yeah. So just to remind us, what's the URL for that website again?
So it's noappetiteforignorance.org. It's also a hashtag. So if you are out and are out with it in your local Chinatown and eating and want to help spread the word and use the hashtag on your social media, I think that's great. There's other campaigns going as well that I've seen that are really great. One out of Australia, that's I think hashtag I will eat with you. And that's another sort of social media campaign that I've seen going around that's just trying to get the word out that these are businesses that are suffering for no real reason. I mean, if our business was suffering because of something we did, then that's something that, I can understand and handle. But to see these businesses suffering for just, fake news, misinformation, and fear, I think it's just really sad. So it's important to try to fight back against that.
Yeah, definitely, and I commend you for setting up the initiative. It's sad that we need something like this to happen, but I commend you for doing it. So no, I think with my sort of next question, that's maybe sort of been answered already, but with what's happening in China, whether it's the racism side or with the coronavirus side or anything like that, do you see, how long do you think tourism will be, or how long do you think it will be before tourism picks up again in China if things all start calming down? Do you see anything negatively affecting China in terms of its tourism because of all this?
It's so hard to tell. I wish I knew the answer. I think we all want to know the answer because there's so much uncertainty. But I think ultimately, tourists will come back to China. It's going to happen. My business partner and I, we both have sort of, one of us is more optimistic, one of us is more pessimistic about the view. So we're just trying to come up with a middle and think, I think in the summer and fall, we're going to have some customers coming back. And I think, but probably not in the same numbers as last year, for example. So I think next year things are going to restart with a vengeance, and we'll be back at 100%, and hopefully sooner. But I think it's kind of a time to just watch the news, try to figure out what's happening, and at this point, it sort of feels like we're all in this together, in the sense that this is not a Chinese problem anymore. This isn't an Italian problem. There's no boundaries, there's no borders at this point. So if the U.S. can't figure out, how to contain it, then that's going to affect everybody for a while as well. So.
For sure, no. I mentioned that, and somebody was talking on social media about it, and I was saying, look, this isn't just going to affect tour operators. It's going to affect agencies like my own. It's going to affect the restaurants in these destinations, local shops. Even the man in the street in America who sells hot dogs, and with tourists coming up, everything is going to be affected by this, no matter what walk of life you're in. So it is quite worrying for a lot of businesses, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we can certainly get through it quicker, sooner rather than later.
I hope so too.
Yeah, so I'm going to finish off by asking, is there any advice that you would give tour operators in general who are worried about their business at this time? Or what do you think they should be focusing on? What do you think they can do? I know it's hard. It's a hard question because every business is different, and every destination is different. We don't know how long this is going to go on for. But is there any advice that you would give to businesses now to say, look, this is what you should be doing now to help combat anything in the future?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's pretty personal, but everybody's situation is different. I think it's just a time to sort of regroup. Don't lose all hope and don't despair, because we've seen time and time again that business will come back, and after terrorist attacks, after pandemics, after SARS, after just about anything, the tourists will come back, and I think you're gonna see budget. Maybe the first wave will be budget travelers that are finding a good deal after all this, and then the business travelers will pick back up, and it'll get back to normal. So I think it's just making sure you have your contingency plans, you're making sure your finances are in order so that you can get through an extended period of time, and making sure in the future that you have a contingency plans as well in place. And I think just being creative, like I said, with ways to be engaging, and it took us a while to figure out. We sort of hunkered down for a few weeks trying to figure out what the message should be. Is there anything we can do? And I think at this point, I don't think you should be in a rush necessarily to pump out content, to pump out what your message is, because ultimately it's a bit of a waiting game, and you have time. And this wasn't something that we just came up with overnight either. So I think in that regard, you can take your time and really think through what you can do. And I think if there's a way to try to have a positive impact on your community, if there's a way to help out even victims in your local, or people that are suffering from in your local community, and you can get your business name out as well. I mean, anything positive that you can do, I think it's worth it at this point. And it's just a matter of hoping that your savings are enough to get through this time and really come out the other end in one piece. And I think it's just recognizing that there's going to be a period of rebuilding, and not losing all hope, because it'll get better eventually, whenever that exactly is.
Yeah,
and I think
sure.
and I think another way to look at it too is, in the beginning, it sort of felt like for us, like, oh, we're going to lose, are we going to lose our ranking on TripAdvisor? Are we going to lose our, our advantage that we have built up over the years of our competitors? And ultimately, it's not like they have any customers coming in either. So I don't think there's this fear where you have to be like, all is lost, everything's done, we'll never pick up the pieces, because ultimately in 6 months or 3 months or a year, whenever it is, everybody was in the same boat. But anything you can do to sort of be positive and get your name out there and stay relevant is good. But even if you don't manage to do anything, I don't think you've lost too much ground against your competitors. So,
yeah, no, I think I certainly think that, even though, as you mentioned, this, supporting your local communities and your local businesses and things like that as well, as much as you can, and I'm just looking out for each other and making sure everyone can get through this. And I think everyone, especially in the tourism industry, and I know this is why I love the tourism industry. Everyone just gets together, they try to help everyone get through it, and it's one of the reasons why I absolutely love this industry. So I can't thank you enough for your time. I think what you're doing with the appetite for ignorance or no appetite for ignorance is commendable. It's such a great initiative that you're doing. So I think what you guys are doing over there is brilliant. So all I can say is thank you so much.
And if anyone else wants to get involved as well, if other tourism operators, we're still looking for other local recommendations, around the world. We're going to keep adding to the site and just, make it a fun database that, of recommendations and great places that, hopefully people will be able to save that map as a resource in the future to use as well. That, I'm, traveling in Madrid, here's an awesome Chinese restaurant that is super authentic, or maybe it's got a interesting, fusion Spanish Chinese feel, whatever it is. I think it's going to be a cool database of seeing what is new and interesting in the Chinese food diaspora in the world now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks again, and I wish you all the best through this period. Hopefully,
thank you very much.
Hopefully we can do this conversation in 6 months' time, and things are looking a lot better.
I really hope so too. Thanks for having me as well.
No problem. Thanks again.